Hello guys, welcome to your 21st lesson in this VueJS course. And in this particular lesson, we're going to be looking at the composition API. Now, earlier on in this course, while we'll be creating our Vue apps, we'll be making use of something called the options API, and which essentially looks like this. Okay, should be familiar with this by now. We have the data functions which return some values. We have our methods, we have the computed properties, and then we have our lifecycle hooks inside of our scripts section of our script tags. Now, we also have another way of actually building our Vue apps, writing our Vue components, which is called the composition API. And this essentially looks like this. So inside of our script, we have a setup function or a setup hooks which can contain everything such as our data, our methods, computed properties, and lifecycle hooks. But what exactly is the composition API? Now, the composition API is a set of APIs that allows us to write Vue components, Vue applications using imported functions instead of declaring options as we have in the option API. Now, the composition API was introduced in VueJS version 3 and version 2.7. So if you're for some reason using any version of Vue older than that, you might not have access to the composition API right out of the box. And the composition API contains APIs such as the reactivity API, it has the lifecycle hooks, it has dependency injection, and so on. Now, why should we make use of composition API, or why was it introduced in the first place? Number one, it allows us to group similar logic together. So for example, let's say you have a particular data you've created and you want to actually write a particular method to manipulate that data. It allows you to easily do that and group them together. Now, another thing is it allows better reuse of your logic. Okay, another reason why the composition API you should make use of it, or it was introduced, is it gives you more flexible way to organize your code. So it introduces a better code or more flexible code organization, and it also produces a better type inference. This is especially useful when you're working with maybe TypeScript instead of pure JavaScript. And then another thing is the composition API ultimately gives you a smaller production bundle. Now, I want you to know that the composition API does not essentially totally changes the way we write our Vue application or renders the option API useless. No, it essentially comes to improve on the option API and to address some of the limitations we have using the option API. Now, another thing I would like to note is when it comes to using the composition API, there are two major ways of writing or using the composition API, writing our codes. The first is making use of the setup hook, which I have shown you earlier, and it looks something like this. So we essentially have our setup function, our setup hook, which we can then put in our data, our method, our computed properties, and our lifecycle hooks, and then return the particular ones we want to expose to the app, to the template. The second way is what I call the setup script. Now, I don't know if this is the official name for this, but this is essentially what I actually call it, and it looks something like this. Now, we don't have the setup function in quotes, but then we have this particular setup keyword which we add to our script. Now, without any further ado, let's take a bit more look into the composition API and see how we can write our composition API and make use of it. Alright, before I continue, I quickly want to take us through documentation on composition API on the VueJS documentation website. And right here you can see in the FAQ any information you need to know about the composition API is essentially present right here. And what if you want to actually learn about the composition API? Now, the moment you go to the documentation website, and let's click on the quick start, or rather maybe click on any of the topic here. Now by default you're going to see the API reference here, and by default it's going to be on the optional API. But if you want to learn along with the composition API and how to write some of those syntax and the necessary things, the API options and all of those stuffs using the composition API, all you just have to do is switch this to the composition API, and you're going to see that every other thing it's going to show you, you're going to learn about, would be written here with the composition API. So for example, let's come to reactivity right here, and if I should come here, okay, and let me switch back to the option API, you can see that the way the codes are written are actually different. But if I should click on the composition API, it actually shows me that same code, that same thing, but using the composition API. Now without any further ado, let's actually dive right into our app and let's begin learning about the composition API. Alright, so I'm back here inside of this app we created some lessons back, and the only changes I've made is inside of this home view which we have here, the template. I've removed the hello world or the welcome components, and if we should check and look at our app, we should have something like this. We can still see this nav bar right here that was added in the app.view, but we don't need to concern ourselves with that. Okay, so let's go back into our code, and remember I told you that there are two ways of writing our composition API code. The first is making use of the setup hook, which we would focus on greatly, and we are going to have our setup function like this, and to see if that works, I can say console.log setup runs. Okay, let's save that and let's see what we have inside here. Okay, we can see it runs the setup function, the setup hook works. Okay, now right here, one of the changes that we have inside of our setup hook is we can basically write normal JavaScript code compared to the previous way when we use data, and let's say we have data, we want to return maybe any value, we have to do return, and this has to be in kind of an object format. We can say name and we can have it to be maybe Naruto. Okay, but we won't do this right here. Let's remove this, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to say let's name equal to Naruto. Okay, and then we can have, okay, let's rank equal to the rank is Genin. Okay, and right here we can then return the specific values we actually want to expose to our template right here. And what I'm basically going to do is I'm going to say return, and right here we can say name, okay, is going to be name, and rank is going to be rank. All right, and we can basically just do this, and we can just return just name and rank. And so we have this here inside of our template here. I'm going to create a paragraph, and then right here I'm going to have this, which is going to say name, and right here we're going to have rank. Now let's take a look at our browser and let's see what we have. Okay, we can see it right here. We have the values being outputted here, Naruto and Genin. Okay, this works fine. One other thing we can do is we can also create a function. Okay, we can say const undo click, and we can have it equal to, okay, I'm going to use an arrow function right here. Okay, and then this particular method is going to do something such as console.log clicked. Okay, to return that, all I just have to do is output that right here, return it here. And another thing is, let's create a button. Okay, so I'm going to create a button, and the button is going to have click me, and right here I'm going to say at click is going to be equal to undo click. Okay, let's correct that. Alright, let's save that and let's come right here, and when we click on this button we are going to see clicked. Okay, we can see that works, and that is looking very simple, not too much of differences here except for our syntax and some things that change. Alright, let's move on. Two things I want to actually note is this setup hook right here actually runs before any of the other life cycle hooks actually run. So if I should come right here and I should do something such as mounted, and I should say console.log component mounted, and let's save that, and we should come right here to our browser, and we're going to see, okay, let me refresh that. Okay, we are going to see that the setup function, the console.log right here, it actually run before this, the component mounted console.log run. Okay, that's one thing you should know. So no matter the lifecycle hook, the setup hook actually runs before any one of them. So even if I have here created, and I should come right here and I should say console.log component created, and let's save that and let's see what we have inside of our browser. Okay, we can see the setup runs first even before the component created run and before this run. So that is one important thing to actually keep note of and to actually put at the back of your mind. Now let's move on. One thing though is, whenever we actually return any of these, we create any of these variables, any of these values, by default they are not reactive values. That is, they are values that can't change. So right here inside of this particular function, if I should say, let's say name equal to let's say, instead of Naruto I say Sasuke, and I save this. Now let's come back here and let's clear this. Okay, let me refresh just to be sure that everything has reloaded. And if I should click on this, we are seeing this being logged to the console, but it's not actually changing the values here. Now we are going to look at how to make this value reactive in a bit, but first let me introduce us to template refs. Okay, very much earlier in the course, we actually look into making use of refs. And just a quick refresher inside of our data function. So let me just do this, and I'm going to quickly comment this out. So inside of our data function, okay, we can access, okay, using this dot ref, or let's say inside of our method we can access, okay, this dot ref dot whatever it is. So we can have something such as, okay, ref equals to, okay, something like this. So right here I can put, let's say, name. So I can access this using div.ref.name, okay, right here, or inside of our method etc. Now let me remove that and let me undo everything I just did now. Now inside of the setup hook, inside of our composition API, the way we do that is slightly different. All right, so the first thing I actually want to do is I want to create a variable. So I'm going to say let, okay, and I'm going to say p, or let's say paragraph, para equal to, I'm going to say ref. Now this ref, we are actually going to import it. Okay, so we right here at the top we're going to have import ref from ref. So this is going to be the structure. So we're going to have this import ref from view. All right, so we're going to say para equal to ref. Now by default I'm going to put null. All right, and what I'm basically going to do is right here I'm going to return para. Okay, this can be any variable name of your choice, but I'm just going to make use of this. All right, and then the next thing we're going to do is right here up here I'm going to say, okay, ref is going to be equal to para. And what I essentially want to do is, whenever we log anything to, whenever I click on this particular function here, instead it's going to log para to the console. So let's do that. Let's try that and let's see how it works. All right, so I'm going to click on this and we can see we have a bunch of objects right here. But if we come right here to the value, okay, we can see we have a particular paragraph, which is this paragraph we are actually selecting. Now to get that particular element, so I can just say para.value. Okay, so let's save that and let's come right here. Okay, so click me, we can see we now have a direct reference to this particular element. So this actually works fine, and we can see we have a bunch of things we can do. Now let's quickly do something interesting. I could say, instead of logging something to the console, I could say something like para dot value dot class list dot add testing. Okay, so let's save that and let's see what that's actually going to do. Okay, so I'm going to clear the console and click on this. Now let's inspect this particular paragraph tag and let's see if it has added. We can see, okay, class equals to testing. Now we can toggle that doing something like, okay, let me just do this. So I can do something like if para dot value dot class list dot contains, and then we can have testing, and then if this is true, then we want to actually, I'm just going to copy. So let's copy this and paste this here. So instead of actually adding, we are going to say remove, and then the else statement is then going to add. All right, let's save that and let's come right here. And okay, now by default, let's check, let's inspect. By default, we shouldn't see that particular class right here, but if we click on it, we can see it's added it to this particular class, to this element. And if we click on this again, we can see it's removed. So we can see how that actually works. So we are able to access this we're able to access this element or any element we want, making use of this particular ref. And we can see that for us to actually access the specific element, we have to use this para.value. All right, that actually works. But how about if, remember I told you these values by default are not reactive. Okay, how about if we want to make it reactive? Okay, number one thing that I need to note before we actually go into that is, whenever you create any variable using this ref, and maybe you use null, okay, but at this particular point before you actually return it here, you can't access it. So let me give you an explanation of what I'm saying. Let me show you an example. If I should say right here console.log and I put here para.value. All right, now let's save that and let's see what we actually have in the console. Okay, we can see that it is null. That is because at this particular point it hasn't been returned yet, but the moment we use this undo click, we've already returned it right here, in use this reference in the template and returned it. So it actually has access to this particular element. Now moving on. Okay, we have this name equals to Naruto and then rank equals Genin. Now how do we make them reactive? Okay, the way to make them reactive is, I'm just going to wrap this in ref. Okay, and I'm going to come here also and we're going to wrap this in ref. Okay, so let's see how that works. So whenever we actually click on anything, I'm going to comment this out temporarily. Whenever we click on anything, we just want to console.log. Now name dot value and then name. All right, so let's save that and let's come right here into our browser. So I'm going to clear the console. Okay, so let's clear that and let's click on this. We can see, okay, the value right here is Naruto, and then that's the name.value, and right here we can see a bunch of objects, but essentially what we need right here is the value. Okay, so let's come here, and what we want to do is actually update this. So whenever we click on the name, we want to say name.value, and then we want to assign it to, let's say, Sasuke. So name.value is now going to be equal to Sasuke. Now if we should come here and let's clear the console and click on this, we can see this got updated. So this is how we can make, one of the ways we can make values reactive, making use of this particular ref right here. Okay, one thing we can also do is, I want to also notice, this can work with any particular data type. This is our ref right here. So instead of having this, I can decide to have, okay, ninja, and this is going to be equal to name. We're going to have name, and that's going to be Naruto. So, and then we're going to have the rank, that's going to be Genin. Okay, now we can see that this is basically an object and it still works the same way. Whether it's an object, it's an array, whatever it is, whatever type of data you want to make use of. And right here, we're instead going to return ninja. And here we can have, okay, ninja, okay, dot value dot name. And right here we can have ninja dot value dot rank. Okay, so let's save that and let's see if that will still work fine. Okay, let's save that and let's see if that will still work fine. All right, okay, that's giving us an error. Let's see. Oh, that's because I actually made a stupid mistake right here. So let me just return these as ninja.name and ninja.rank, which actually brings me to the next thing I want to note. Whenever we are making use of our reactive values here, these are our ref right here inside of the template. We don't need to actually make use of dot value dot whatever it is, but whenever we actually want to make use of it inside this our setup function right here inside our setup hook, that's when we actually need to say something such as dot value. So right here, if I want to access, change the name, I want to update the name. So what I'm basically going to do is I'm going to say ninja dot value dot name, and that's going to be equal to Sasuke. And right here, I'm going to duplicate this, and I'm going to say ninja dot value dot rank, and that's going to, instead of being Genin, that's going to be Chunin. Okay, so let's save that and let's come right here, and I'm going to refresh. Okay, we can see we got our values here, and if I should click on this, we can see it's getting updated. So to note that again, whenever we're accessing inside of our setup hook, we use dot value, but whenever we're actually outputting it right here, we don't need to make use of dot value. We can just access our variable or our data directly. Now, one thing I actually want to show us is we can also make use of these our reactive values, making use of the various view directives. So if I should create an input field right here, and I should say something such as v model is going to be equal, we don't have any variable created right now to actually bind it to, so let's create one. I'm going to essentially say let's search equal to ref, and we're going to have just an empty string, and I'm just going to return it right here, search. Okay, so right here we're going to come here and give it the name search, and to be sure that okay this actually works well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove okay this here. I'm going to remove this, and I'm going to instead use the updated hook, and let's see, I'm going to say console.log search. So let's save that and let's see what actually it gives us. So okay, we are having an error, search is not defined, and that is my mistake, that is my bad. So this is going to be this dot search. Very soon, shortly, I'm going to show us how to actually make use of the lifecycle hooks inside of our setup hook right here. All right, so let's save this and let's come back to our browser, and I'm going to clear the console. So whenever we type anything, we can see it's getting updated right here, and we are logging into the console. And if we should click on this button to be sure that okay this particular value is also being updated right here, I can, instead of just doing this, I can say console.log, and we are going to say search.value. Okay, so let's save that and let's come back right here. Okay, I'm going to clear this and I'm going to type all these, or let me just, okay, so I'm going to type Kakashi. All right, and whenever I click on this, we're going to see it's being logged out right here. So Kakashi, whenever I click on this, you see right here Kakashi right here being logged to the console, and that actually works well as intended. All right, so I'm going to just comment this out for now. And now, I told you that we have two ways we can actually create reactive values. The first is making use of ref. And then secondly, we have our reactivity API. We can say reactive. Okay, we can import reactive from Vue. Now, right here, instead of this just being Ninja, I'm going to say Ninja 1. Okay, and right here, instead of just actually typing these out one after the other, so let me just replace everything. So this is going to be Ninja 1, and let's replace everything. So we have right here Ninja 1. So the second Ninja we're going to actually create, we're going to create that making use of reactive. So how to make use of reactive? Very simple. We can just say let Ninja 2, and instead of this being ref, this is going to be reactive. Now, one major difference between reactive and ref. Okay, another thing, let's rename this to undo click 1. All right, so let's return that undo click 1, and I'm essentially also going to say something such as undo click 2. So we're going to have 2. Now, one thing that might be the major difference between reactive and ref is whenever we actually want to access anything right here, we don't need to use dot value. We can just say ninja1 dot name and then ninja1 dot rank. So right here, instead of this being okay, this particular one being Naruto, I'm going to change this to okay Kakashi, and right here this is going to be okay Jonin. And let's save that, and instead of outputting ninja 1 right here, we're going to say ninja 2. Okay, and also right here ninja 2. And right here, instead of undo click 1, we're going to use the second one, which actually manipulates the reactive value we created. So we have ninja 2 here, and don't forget we actually have to return that here right here. So this is going to be ninja 2, and I'm going to clear all of this right here. All right, so whenever we click on this, we say the ninja2.name should equal to Sasuke. No, we want it to be still be equal to let's see Madara, and then the rank is going to be, let me just use this for fun. Okay, so let's save that and let's come right here. All right, we are saying here undo click 2 is assigned a value but never used. Okay, let's copy that, and we are not returning undo click 2 also. All right, so we've returned ninja 2, and right here the second is, I think we have rank somewhere here. Okay, we're returning rank. Okay, yeah, and we actually didn't create, we've removed the variable we created for it. So let's save that and let's come back right here. Okay, duplicate key ninja 2. Oh, right here, and let's save that, and let's see, we shouldn't have any error again except for this. Undo click 2 is assigned a value but never used. Okay, so let's return this also, and let's save that. All right, so I'm going to clear the console, and we can see right here, okay, we have the ninja 2, we have okay the ninja 2 dot name, and then right here the ninja 2 dot rank. And if I should click on this button, we saw it got updated, and we didn't have to access it using dot value dot name like we did for this ref. So one of the major differences is, the number one difference is that okay, for whenever you make use of ref right here to make any value reactive, you have to use dot value to actually access that particular ref, and same here with DDM. But whenever you make use of the reactive right here, you can just access that particular data directly without making use of the value. Now in retrospect, you might think, it might seem that okay, then you shouldn't maybe make use of this reactive, and you should instead make use of refs to make your values reactive. But there is also one downside to actually making use of reactive, which I'm going to show us. So let's quickly create two new variables, and we're going to say let test1 equal to ref, and I'm going to say um something such as VueJS, and then test2 is then going to be equal to reactive, and instead of this being Vue.js, this is going to be, let's say, React.js. Okay, so we have test1 and test2, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to return test1 and then return test2. All right, so instead of actually just outputting, we're also going to create two function. Okay, so I'm going to come here and say const change test1 equal to, so this is going to be an arrow function, and we're going to say test1 dot value equal to, instead of Vue.js, this is going to be, let's say, Next. Yeah, Next.js. And I'm going to also duplicate this aspect, and instead of being change test1, this is going to be change test2. And instead, remember, we're making use of reactive for the test2, and then this is just going to be test2 equal to, instead of Next.js, we're going to say Next.js. All right, so let's actually output these two values right here inside of our template. So what I'm basically going to do is I'm going to create a paragraph right here, and I'm going to say test1 and okay, test2. So let's save that and let's come right here into our browser right here. Okay, we haven't outputted these two functions also, so let's copy that, and I'm going to just add them here and add a comma to separate. So let's see, and we should see it right here. Okay, so we have Vue.js here and we have React.js here. So how about we try and update using a button? All right, so what I'm basically going to do in that particular case is I'm going to have a button up here. So inside of a div, I'm going to have a button, and the button is basically going to say update test variables, and we're going to have our click event. So I'm going to say at click, and that is going to be equal to update. Okay, so that should be change test. All right, let's do this. Instead of doing this, I'm just going to create just one variable. Okay, so let's copy this, cut this rather, and paste it here, and this is just going to be change test, and let's clear this. So we have this function right here, this method, and I'm going to say change test. So let's save that and let's come into our browser. All right, so we have it right here, update test variables. So what happens when I click on this? We are going to see that only this one got updated. And why is that? Now, that is the second, we bring me to the second differences between making use of refs and making use of reactive. Now, whenever you make use of reactive to actually make a variable, a value reactive, you can only work with non-primitive data types. Okay, so this test2 actually is a primitive. We are actually adding a primitive value, and primitive values in JavaScript, we have things such as strings, numbers, we have booleans, none, etc. So whenever you create any reactive value making use of this reactive API in Vue.js, you won't actually, it's not actually reactive. But when you have maybe something such as an object or maybe an array, etc., you can actually make use of reactive, and it's going to work as well as you need it to. All right, so I've actually cleared up our project file, our code a bit, and in case you're actually wondering and you're thinking, how about the course file for this particular lesson. Don't worry, by the time you get to the GitHub repo, you should see the lesson 22 part 1. So the first half have actually been what everything we've covered so far have actually been uploaded there. All right, let's move on and let's look at how we can actually make use of things such as computed properties, how we can make use of things such as the watch and the what effect and lifecycle hooks in our composition API. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to essentially return computed. Okay, so that should be computed. So from view, and what I want to do is I want to do something such as const computed value. So if that is going to be equal to, we're going to have computed. Okay, the computed we imported, and that is going to take in a function, and that function is basically going to return a value. So right here, let me just do this and let me say return. Let's use something such as ninjas. Ninjas are awesome. Okay, so it's going to basically return this, and right here we can then just return this computed value. And remember, earlier in the course when we discussed about using computed properties, they are essentially used as a value. So right here I'm going to copy this, and down here I'm going to do something such as, okay, use our string interpolation, and I'm going to paste this. So let's save that and let's come back to our browser. All right, we can see it right here. Computed properties, it returns ninjas are awesome. So let's quickly do something. Let's have a kind of list. So I'm going to come right here. I'm going to create const. I'm going to say ninjas, or let me just use Konoha ninjas, and that's going to be equal to ref, and we're going to have an array inside of this, and this is going to be an array of strings. So I'm going to have Neji, I'm going to have Naruto, I'm going to have, let's say, something such as Sasuke. Now to actually save time, let me just paste in some more values right here. Okay, so we have this list of Konoha ninjas, or for simplicity, let's rename them as ninjas. And essentially, I'm actually going to return these ninjas right here. Okay, so let's return ninjas right here. And let's quickly loop through. So right here, I'm going to have a div here, and inside of this div, I'm going to have, okay, a UL. Okay, that should be UL, and inside of here we're going to have li, and this li is going to have v4. Okay, so we're going to have our v4. Okay, and we're going to say ninjas. Okay, so I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to say ninja in ninjas. Okay, for ninja in ninjas, and then the key is going to be, no, key is going to be ninja. And right here we're going to have something such as ninja. All right, so let's save that and let's see what that gives us. Okay, so coming right here, we can see, oh, we have the list of ninjas right here. All right, which is cool. Now how about we should have a kind of functionality where we can actually search through this, and we know that our v model is getting updated whenever we type anything right here. So one way to actually do that is we can have our computed property right here. So instead of returning this particular thing right here, what we are going to say is return ninjas dot value. Remember, we have to, whenever we want to access, we have to use value, then dot filter. So since we are actually accessing an array, and inside of here we're going to say something, we are going to actually access the individual ninja, and then we're going to say ninja is equal to, or no, rather we can say ninja dot includes, and then we can have search dot value. All right, so let's save that and let's see what we have right here. And instead of we actually looping through this particular ninja right here, these ninjas, we are going to say computed. Let me just rename this to computed ninjas. Okay, so I'm going to copy this and paste this here. And the next thing we want to do is actually replace these ninjas with computed ninjas. Okay, so let's come back right here and let's search. Okay, so we're going to search for Naruto. Okay, we can see it's getting updated right here. And if let's say, okay, I want to search for this Imawari and I actually want to start typing from here, so I'm just going to type AWA and we can see that actually works. So that is how we can actually make use of the computed properties inside of the composition API. Alright, if you've ever worked with, let's say, React, for example, at a particular point, you are going to maybe learn to make use of hooks. And one of the hooks we have is maybe the use effect. And okay, yeah, we have something that basically looks like this. Alright, and in which you can actually watch a particular variable when it changes. And in Angular, we also have the ng on change, which basically looks something like this. Alright, in the composition API in VueJS, we also have something similar, which is the watch and the watch effect. How about let's quickly take a dive into those two. So we can import watch and also watch effect. Okay, so what is the difference between watch and watch effect, and what exactly are they used for? All right, so down here I'm going to have the watch. Okay, so the watch, and we're going to basically take in two particular parameter. Okay, the first is what we're actually watching, and then the second is the callback function. So I'm going to say search. Okay, and then we're going to have, okay, something such as something like this. All right, and we can also have the watch effect. And if I should come here and do this, okay, all right, so one thing is, for the watch we actually pass in the value we are watching, and then the second is the callback function. But for the watch effect, we only have to pass in a callback function. All right, so what I'm basically going to do is I'm going to say console.log. Okay, I'm going to have right here, okay, a template string. The value of search is, and then going to do this. Okay, search dot value. All right, and then yeah, I'm going to say do something simple such as console.log, and then watch effect is running, or watch effect active. Yeah, let's do something like this, and let's save. And okay, let's come back to our app. All right, so I'm going to actually, before clearing the console, we can see right here by default we see the watch effect active right here. So it's going to run automatically whenever the setup hook actually runs. So that is the number one thing to note about watch effect. But what about watch itself? What if we come here and we type in something? I'm going to type in something. Okay, now we can see it right here. Now remember earlier that I made use of the updated hook that we use normally in the options API. So a better way to actually deal with that is making use of this watch. It's actually going to watch this particular variable whenever it changes. So that way, let's say for example I need to actually fetch data from an API and to update this particular ninja's array. So that is one of the ways we can actually make use of watch and watch effect. But another thing is, for watch effect we can see that it's only running for the first time that, okay, our app is mounted, our setup hook works. Now one way to actually let it know that, okay, I also want you to run whenever this search actually changes, is we just have to do something such as use that particular variable right here. So whenever this particular variable it's included inside of this callback function, any variable that is included, it automatically watch whenever it changes. Okay, so let me just do search.value and let's save. Now we're going to see that whenever, let me clear the console and let's refresh that manually. Okay, we can see watch effect active, and it gave us an empty string because that is the current state of our search variable right now, our reactive variable. So if I should type in something, we are going to see watch effect active and the value of search. We are going to see both of them are actually watching it. So the first one for the watch is going to tell us the value of search is this, and then the second is actually for the watch effect, and because we've included a particular value right here, it's going to automatically watch that value. So that is one way we can make use of watch and watch effect in Vue.js. Now, finally, let's look at how we can actually make use of a lifecycle hooks inside of our Vue.js app using the composition API. Now, all we have to do again is import it from Vue. We can say on mounted, okay, and we can import the various lifecycle hook we need. We can do something such as on updated. Okay, so let's make use of these two. So we have on mounted and on updated. So I'm going to do something such as on mounted, and this is essentially going to take in a callback function. All right, and I'm going to say console.log now mounted. All right, and another thing is right here we can duplicate this and change it to on updated. So I'm going to say on updated. Okay, so now updated. All right, so we can see how we are able to import this from Vue. Okay, so let's see if that actually works. So I'm going to save that and I'm going to come right here. So let's refresh that again. And one thing I actually want to show us, let me come right here, is I already explained this, but I also want to demo this, and we are going to say setup run. Okay, so let's save that and let's come right here, and we're going to see this is going to run first. Then we have the watch effect, and then we have the now mounted, which is our lifecycle hook. What if we actually change and we updated? Okay, whenever we update anything, okay, we are going to see that it's going to actually run this our lifecycle hook, which is this on updated function right here. This is the various way we can actually use and tap into the various aspects of the composition API and everything it has given to us. Now we can say that writing our JavaScript code right here, our Vue.js code, is much more easier and smoother and has various advantages. Okay, before we round up this particular lesson, let's quickly take a look at two things. What if we actually want to pass props and make use of it in a composition API? How do we do that? And secondly, remember I told you that this setup hook is only one of the first ways we can write our composition API code. So let's take a look at the second method also. The first thing is I've created a component right here, which is test component. I've created it right here, and if we actually want to accept props, okay, we've looked at that, so we can do something such as props, and the name of the props is going to be in an array. First we want to have title, and automatically I can have access to this title here. And if we actually want to make use of this in our composition API, okay, we can essentially, let me add a comma here, we can essentially accept props here, and inside of this we can say console.log, and I'm going to say props value in composition API, and we are going to, whenever we want to access it inside of our setup hook, we are going to say props.title. Okay, so I can save that and come right here inside of my component here. The first thing I want to do is, okay, I'm going to say test component, and okay, it automatically imported that for me, and we have test component here. Remember, we have to pass in a title. Title is equal to, let's see, and instead of actually just passing in dummy value, I'm going to actually bind this to search. Remember, we are returning search right here. Okay, and the next thing we actually want to do is, okay, register a component, which automatically did for us. Okay, and let's come back here to our app and let's see. Okay, so we are not seeing anything because the value is currently an empty string. We can see it right here being logged to the console. But when we change it and then we change, we should now see the value right here. And to be sure that this is our component, let me add a bit of text in front of it, and we're going to say child component, and let's save that and let's come back right here. And now we are going to see this is the child component, okay, and we can see it rendering here and the prop works. All right, let's move on and let's see. Now remember I told you we can either use the setup hook or we can make use of the setup script. So all I have to do in that case is add setup right here. All right, and once we've done that, the next thing is we can get rid of every other thing. Okay, I can come right here, clear this off, and scroll down here, and we can also clear this and this off. Okay, and let's see what else. I don't actually need this again also, and this, yeah. Okay, so let's actually save that and let's see what we get. All right, we see that everything is still working. Now, one of the advantages of making use of this setup script is it's more of like a syntactic sugar that, okay, Vue allow us to view ads over everything. Now, whenever every of the top level variables we create is automatically exposed right here, so we don't need to actually manually return anything. Okay, so those are just the major differences between the composition API using the setup hook and using the setup script. Now we've come to the end of this lesson, and in the next lesson we're going to be looking at, okay, making use of the Vue CLI versus the create view that Vue gives us, which makes use of Vite under the hood, and we're going to compare and look at which you should consider for your next VueJS project. So I'll see you there.